something completely unexpected just happened. Imagine an album that was released more than a year ago, suddenly surging back, breaking barriers that no other Korean artist has ever crossed. That album is Jimin's Muse. And what it just achieved is nothing short of history. BTS's Jimin has once again proven that he is not just an idol, not just a singer, but a force of nature in the music world. His second solo album, Muse, has officially become the fastest Korean language album ever to reach 3.3 billion streams on Spotify. 3.3 billion. Let that number sink in. That's billions of plays, billions of moments where listeners around the globe press play because they couldn't get enough of his voice, his artistry, his emotion. And here's the detail that makes this record even more mind-blowing. It took only 420 days for Muse to hit that milestone. That's just over a year. No other Korean album has ever done it that fast. And even more, Muse isn't just one of many. It's the first and only Korean solo album in history to cross 3.3 billion streams. That puts Jimin in a league of his own. But here's what gives me chills. This album, more than a year old, is not slowing down. From September 5th to 11th, Muse actually climbed 13 spots on the Spotify Global Weekly Top Albums chart, landing at number 50. And that means it's been on that chart for 60 weeks straight. 60 weeks of staying relevant. 60 weeks of people around the world keeping this music alive. Most albums peak, shine for a moment, and then fade away. But Muse is still alive, still glowing, still demanding attention. And when we look at the United States, the story becomes even more extraordinary. On the US Spotify Weekly Top Albums chart, Muse didn't just move. It skyrocketed, leaping an incredible 42 spots in a single week, reaching number 99. That wasn't just the biggest jump of the week. It was the kind of rise that proves something deeper. That this music is connecting. It's speaking to people who maybe never even understood Korean before, but who can feel every emotion in Jimin's voice. And with that, Muse became the first and only K-pop solo album to remain on the US chart for an entire year. 52 consecutive weeks. That's not just popularity, that's permanence. But let's not forget the beginning of this journey, July 19th, 2024. That was the day Jimin released Muse. And in its very first week, it shattered expectations, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard 200. No K-pop solo artist had ever gone that high before. And then it stayed there, 34 weeks in total on the chart. 34 weeks that built another record, the longest charting K-pop solo album in Billboard history. And that record? It still hasn't been broken. What makes all of this so powerful isn't just the numbers, it's the story behind them. Jimin poured his heart into Muse. The album wasn't just a collection of songs, it was his diary, his emotions, his art. And the world didn't just listen, they embraced it, they lived with it, they made it their own soundtrack. That's why more than a year later, people are still streaming it, still falling in love with it, still helping it climb the charts as if it were brand new. Think about it. Billions of plays mean billions of emotions felt. Billions of moments where someone somewhere found comfort, healing, or joy in Jimin's music. That's the real power of Muse. It's not just an album. It's a living, breathing connection between Jimin and millions of hearts worldwide. And so the question now becomes, where does Jimin go from here? If Muse is still making history after more than a year, then maybe the real story isn't just about the records he's breaking, but about the records he hasn't even set yet. Because with Jimin, it feels like history is always just one song away.